हरिः ओम् नमः सर्वेभ्यः। अद्य कृदन्तप्रकरणस्य सप्तसप्ततितमः पाठः। अस्मिन् वर्गे निष्ठाप्रत्यययोः प्रक्रियायाः अध्ययनं प्रारभामहे। प्रारम्भे वन्दनम्। येनाक्षरसमाम्नायम् अधिगम्य महेश्वरात् कृत्स्नं व्याकरणं प्रोक्तं तस्मै पाणिनये नमः। वाक्यकारं वररुचिं भाष्यकारं पतञ्जलिं पाणिनिं सूत्रकारं च प्रणतोऽस्मि मुनित्रयम्। मुनित्रयं नमस्कृत्य तदुक्तिः परिभाव्य च वैयाकरणसिद्धान्तकौमुदीयं विरच्यते। पूर्वस्मिन् वर्गे अस्माभिः निष्ठाप्रत्ययोः अध्ययनं प्रारब्धम्। तत्र निष्ठाप्रत्ययान्तशब्दानाम् अध्ययनसमये विशेषरूपेण बिन्दुद्वयं पृथग्रूपेण अधीयते। निष्ठाप्रत्ययानां प्रयोगः, वाक्येषु तेषां कथं प्रयोगः भवति इति, तथा च निष्ठाप्रत्ययानां प्रक्रिया, तत्र रूपाणि कथं सिद्ध्यन्ति इति। तत्र प्रयोगानां विषये वर्गद्वयं स्वीकृत्य भिन्नाः विषयाः अस्माभिः दृष्टाः। भूतकाले, वर्तमानकाले, नो चेत् कुत्रचित् अधिकरणे, कुत्रचित् कालसामान्ये, भावकर्मणि, कर्तरि, कर्मणि एतेषु भिन्नेषु विषयेषु निष्ठाप्रत्ययान्तशब्दाः कथं प्रयुज्यन्ते इति सर्वम् अस्माभिः सूत्राणाम् आधारेण पठितम्। अद्यतनवर्गात् आरभ्य प्रक्रियायाः अध्ययनं प्रारभामहे. At least 10 to 12 classes, probably 15 more classes, we are going to spend on detailed understanding of the prakriya behind the nishtha pratyayas. तत्र प्रारंभे प्रक्रियायाः अध्ययनात् पूर्वं निष्ठासम्यक सूत्रस्य किञ्चित् अध्ययनं पुनरेकवारं कुर्मः। पूर्वस्मिन् वर्गे मया उक्तं तत्र कश्चन भाष्यविषयः अपि अस्ति। तस्मिन् विषये पूर्वस्मिन् वर्गे न किञ्चित् चिन्तनं कृतं, परन्तु इदानीं प्रक्रियायाः अध्ययनात् पूर्वं कश्चन भाष्यविषयः अपि अस्ति, तस्य अध्ययनं कृत्वा अग्रे सरामः. So it all starts with the sutram that defines the nishtha pratyaya. तक्तवतु निष्ठा इति प्रथमाध्यायस्य प्रथमपादस्य सूत्रमस्ति। पूर्वस्मिन् वर्गे अपि मया पाठितं। तः च तवतुः च तक्तवतु प्रत्ययो निष्ठा संज्ञौ भवतः इत्यनेन इयं निष्ठा इति संज्ञा विधीयते। तत्र तृतीयाध्यायस्य द्वितीयपादं पश्यामश्चेत् तत्र निष्ठा इति भिन्नं सूत्रम्। अनेन सूत्रेण एतयोः निष्ठासम्यकप्रत्ययोः कथं प्रयोगः भवति, भूतकाले प्रयोगः भवति, भूते निष्ठा प्रत्ययो प्रयुज्यते इति अर्थः स्पष्टीभवति. So this all is okay on the face of it. However, let's try to zoom inside each of these definitions. किञ्चित् विस्तरेण किञ्चित् चिन्तनं कुर्मः एतयोः सूत्रयोः. तत्र कश्चन विशेषः अस्माभिः प्रायः दृश्येत. If we think a little bit more about each of these sutras, something amiss turns out, something unusual turns out of both of these sutras. Let's take a detailed look. प्रारभामहे. तत्र क्तवतु निष्ठा इति सूत्रस्य काशिका व्याख्यानं पुनरेकवारं पश्यामः. क्तः च क्तवतुश्च क्तवतु प्रत्ययौ निष्ठा संज्ञौ भवतः. The first statement itself is a little alarming. Why it is alarming? Because if we read it properly, it says that the entities kta and ktavatu, which are already called as pratyayas, are now being called nishtha. Not any two random words called kta and ktavatu are being termed as nishtha. The two entities which are already called as pratyayas are being called as nishtha. Kta ktavatu ityetayoh samasah taktavatu etau pratyayau nishtha samnyo bhavatah. So if there is a dhatu, or if there is a pratipadikam, or if there is an agama called kta, it's not going to be called nishtha. It has to be a pratyaya, and therefore, and only then it will be called nishtha. What it means is that kta tatha ktavatu etayoh pratyayayoh निष्ठा संज्ञा भवति. प्रथमं एतौ प्रत्ययौ स्तः इति अस्माभिः ज्ञातव्यं, तदनन्तरम् एव तयोः निष्ठा संज्ञा भवति. The bottom line over here is that you need to know that ta and ktavatu are pratyayas before they get the nishtha samnya. Fair enough. So much so far is good. But how do I know that these two are pratyayas? When I want to find something being whether something is a pratyaya or not, The only place where I have to look for is the pratyayadhikara. Sarve pratyayaha pratyayadhikare pathyante, pratyadhikarat bahihi pratyayaha na santi. So when I say kta and ktavatu are pratyayas which are being called as nishtha, I need to have a separate sutram in the pratyadhikara which will tell me that these are pratyayas. Otherwise, they don't become pratyayas, they are not pratyayas, and if they are not pratyayas, they are not nishtha. अतः तत्र प्रत्याधिकारं पश्यामः तत्र क्त तथा क्तवतु एतयोः शब्दयोः कुत्र प्रत्ययसंज्ञा भवति इति प्रश्नः। तर्हि तत्र प्रत्याधिकारं गच्छामश्चेत् we have started studying pratyadhikara, the Kridanta Prakaranam, all the way from the beginning, but we have never come across any sutram that talks about kta and ktavatu being the pratyaya, and this is the first time we are coming across this sutram nishtha, which says nishtha samnyaka shabdaha pratyaya samnyakaha bhavanti. So this particular sutram, it actually does two things. Understand this part very carefully. Nishtha iti sutrena bindu dvayam uchyate. First, the kta and ktavatu pratyayas, the kta and ktavatu entities which are being called as nishtha are being termed as pratyayas. Nishtha samnyakayoho anena sutreda pratyaya samnya diyate. Because they are in the pratyayadhikara, by the definition of pratyayadhikara, the nishtha entities now become pratyayas, and on the top of it, they get the usage in the bhutakala. अतः निष्ठा अनेन सूत्रेण वस्तुतस्तु बिन्दुद्वयमुच्यते। सर्वप्रथमं तु निष्ठा सम्यक शब्दयोः प्रत्ययसंज्ञा भवति इति प्रथमम्। एतौ निष्ठा सम्यक शब्दौ प्रत्ययसंज्ञायां प्राप्तायां भूते काले प्रयुज्येते इति अपरम्। And therefore the standalone meaning of this nishtha sutram, only if you take the first fragment out of it, it says that kta ktavatu nishtha samnyakau staha tayoho pratyaya samnya bhavati. And now we see a problem. We see a mutual interdependency over here, the itaretarashraya, the anyonyashraya, the cyclic dependency over each other. The first sutram says that the entities which are already known to be pratyayas are now nishtha. The second sutra says the entities that are already known to be nishtha are now pratyayas. Nishtha iti sutram तत्तवतु निष्ठा इत्युक्तं सः निष्ठा सम्यकः प्रत्ययः भूते भवति. So निष्ठा सम्यक, even if the sutra says निष्ठा सम्यकः प्रत्ययः भूते भवति, there are two things that this sutra defines. It first defines the nishtha terms to be pratyayas because it is in the pratyadhikara, and on the top of it, it gives the usage in the bhutadhikara, bhutakala. Therefore, the first sutra which defines the term nishtha requires that these entities be the pratyaya. The second sutra, which defines the term pratyaya, requires the two entities to be nishtha because that's what the sutra says. Thus, taktavato pratyayau staha chedeva tayoho nishtha samnya. Taktavato nishtha samnyakau staha chedeva tayoho pratyaya samnya. This is not acceptable. This is mutual interdependency. This is itaretarashraya, and itaretarashraya is a fundamental problem in the Vyakarana Shastra. Itaretarashrayani karyani iha shastre naiva prakalpyante. Remember, all the way at the beginning of Siddhanta Kaumudi, there was an itaretarashraya of halantyam and adirantyena saheta, and therefore Bhattoji Dikshita had to break down halantyam into two different halantyams, each with a different meaning, and then break the itaretarashraya and then repeat halantyam in each of its meaning to say halantyam, adirantena saheta, and again halantyam. Or even in previous class we saw that there was a possible itaretarashraya between nishtha and bhute. Bhute has a kta pratyaya which is defined by the sutra nishtha, and nishtha can define that pratyaya only in the bhuta. So then there was an interdependency, and we broke it by saying bhute iti avyayam asti. So anytime you see an interdependency, itaretarashraya, A implies B and B implies A, or A is required for B and B is required for A, if you see that cyclic dependency, it has to be broken down. Unless it is broken down, the logical foundations of the Shastra cannot be considered to be solid or cannot be considered to be error-free. अतः अत्र कीदृशः इतरेतराश्रयः तक्तवतो प्रत्ययसंज्ञकौ स्तः तयोः निष्ठा संज्ञा भवति परन्तु तत्तवतु निष्ठा सम्यकौ स्तः चेदेव तयोः प्रत्ययसंज्ञा भवति. Now Bhashya is addressing this point, and at this point in time Bhashya says that this is definitely an iteratorashraya, but this is not really a problematic iteratorashraya. So Bhashya is saying this is only a game of the language, game of the words that we are playing, and ideally there is no confusion over here. The Bhashyakara says that this kind of iteratorashraya is not to be worried about, because this is very similar to lot of cases that we talk in our daily life. He actually gives an example. He says, Asya sutrasya shatakam vayaha. If I tell somebody, take this thread and sew a cloth out of it, then this statement itself, sew a cloth out of it, is kind of an iteratorashraya, or is kind of a cyclic dependency. If it is a cloth, it cannot be sewed. If it needs to be sewed, it is not a cloth. So a cloth is a final entity which is obtained after the process of sewing is complete, but we just ignore that and we say take this thread and sew a cloth out of it. A few more examples in real life can help us understand this. So for example, take these grains and cook curry out of it. Now if it is curry, it is already cooked, and if it is cooking, then you're cooking grains, you're not cooking curry. So cook curry out of these grains, or say build say a statue out of this rock, or say build say a kumbham out of this mrittika. All these cases are the situations where we are only using a samjna before it is being defined, and such kind of using things before they are defined is not really a complicated case of iteratorashraya, is what Bhashyakara is saying. So what Bhashyakara says over here is that when you say taktavatu pratyayau tayoho nishtha samnya bhavati, you interpret it by saying that taktavatu yayoho agre pratyay samnya pathyate tayoho idanim nishtha samnya bhavati. Just like the way these are the grains, cook the soup, or cook the vyanjanam out of it, dal out of it, what you're actually saying is the end product of that whole process is what you're talking about. Take this thread and create a cloth out of it. The cloth is the end product which is being referred right in the beginning, before that product even exists. So this is termed in the Vyakarana Shastra as bhavini samnya, a samnya that will exist later on. Bhavini samnya is the samnya that is being used even before it actually comes into existence. So let's read what Nyasakara says, and then I'll actually take you to the exact wordings of the Bhashya. So the Nyasakara points out this particular iteratorashraya. Atha kena vihitayoho taktavatvoho esha samnya vidiyate. So this is the discussion in taktavatu nishtha. Kena vihitayo taktavatoho vatvoho. Are there any random taktavatus that are getting the samnya nishtha? The answer is no. The pratyayas called kta and ktavatu are getting the samnya nishtha. So kena vihitayoho, which sutra is giving the pratyaya? The sutra is itself called the nishtha, which is reusing the term that is being defined. So he says, kena vihitayoho taktavatvoho esha samnya vidhiyate anayaiva samnyaya. The same samnya called nishtha is being used to define the pratyayatva of the kta and ktavatu. The same pratyayatva is used to define the term nishtha. So he says, yadi evam nishtha samnyaya taktavatu bhavyeta tau eva shritya nishtha samnya. So that's the cyclic dependency. Iti iteretarashrayah doshaha bhavati. Iteretarashrayani shastrani iteretarashrayani karyani iha shastre naiva prakalpyante. Na prakalpyante. So you cannot have the karyas which are interdependent on each other in Vyakarana Shastra, in any Shastra in general. For retaining the sanity of the Shastram, you should have a proper sequencing, and not A depends on B and B depends on A. And then he makes it clear that this is not a very big issue. This is not a strong iteratorashra that one needs to be worried about. Naisha doshaha bhavini samya vidyayate. The term will be defined, it's just being used in advance because there is going to be no confusion later on. Yatha asya sutrasya shatakam vaya iti. Take the thread and sew a cloth out of it. If it's a cloth, it doesn't need to be sewed. If it is not a cloth, if it is to be sewed, it's not a cloth. So tau bhute kale bhavatah yayo nishtha iti samnya bhavati iti atra arthaha. So that's what the essence of bhashya is being captured over here by Nyasa. Let's actually take a look at what Kashika says and what bhashya says in this context, and then we will jump to the prakriya discussion. So taktavatu nishtha iti uktam. This is 32102, the fourth sheet that we are talking about. Taktavatu nishtha iti uktam. Saha nishtha samyaka pratyayah bhute bhavati. कृतं कृतवान् भुक्तं भुक्तवान्. इदानीं सः इतरेतराश्रयस्य विषये वदति. निष्ठायाम् इतरेतराश्रयत्वात् अप्रसिद्धिः, not acceptable. संज्ञायां तक्तवतु भाव्येते, सतोः च अनयोः संज्ञायाः भाव्यम्. A depends on B, B depends on A. नैष दोषः भाविनी संज्ञा विज्ञायते, सः भूते भवति यस्य उत्पन्नस्य निष्ठा इत्येषा संज्ञा भवति. सामर्थ्यात् तक्तवतोः विधानम् एतत्. There is no much discussion about this point in Kaumudi. In fact, if you go to the previous sutram, in taktavatu nishtha, Kaumudi doesn't even use the word pratyaya, unlike Kashika. He just says etau nishtha samnyaustaha. So basically, the reason why Kaumudi omits all these things is because whether this is itaretarashraya or not is only a doubt that is being raised by, say, one of the students of Bhashyakara, and Bhashyakara has said that this is not an itaretarashraya that one needs to be worried about. So it's kind of an artificial doubt that's being raised and then being clarified by the Bhashyakara. All this has been dropped out by Kaumudi, and it just says etau nishtha samnyaustaha. Let's read Bhashyakarasya vachanam, because it actually explains this in a very beautiful way. So bhavini samnya vidnyasyate. He writes one full 2 lines elaborating on the example. Tadyatha kaschit kanchit tantuvayam aha asya sutrasya shatakam vaya iti saha pashyati yadi shatako navatavyaha. If it is already a cloth, what to see out of it? Athavatavyo na shatakaha. If it is to be sewed, it's not a cloth. Shatakaha vatavyashcheti vipratishiddham. They are contradictory. Shatakaha, this is t. Shatakaha vatavyaha cha iti vipratishiddham. So that's the argument. That's the Purva Paksha. And then Uttar Paksha clarifies it. Bhavini khalu asya samnya abhipreta. Sahamanyate vatavyaha yasmin nute shakata ityetad bhavati. I am building something which after being built will be called a shataka. So let me just use that term shataka and say I am building shataka. Evam iha api. Same thing is being repeated over here. Evam iha api tau bhute kale bhavataha yayoho abhinirvruttayoho nishtha ityetesha samnya bhavati. इत्येषा संज्ञा भविष्यति. So अनेन प्रकारेण अत्र अस्मिन् सूत्रे भाष्यकारेण अत्र प्रायः कुत्रचित् इतरेतराश्रयः विद्यते वा इति कस्यचन छात्रस्य संशयम् अधिकृत्य तस्य स्पष्टीकरणम् अपि दत्तम् अस्ति. अग्रे गच्छामः. So at this point in time I would like to jump on the prakriya of the Kridanta, the nishtha pratyayas. Let's actually go to the flow chart that we have been referencing for the prakriya. A few words before we jump onto this. The prakriya of the nishtha pratyayas is undoubtedly the most involved and the most complex prakriya of the entire Kridanta Prakaranam. If you need to master the Kridanta Prakaranam, you really need to master the nishtha prakriya very well. And therefore, even if you have not done the exercises for, like I had given a sheet for those, for like a sheet of like 2000 verbs, where I asked you to write whatever forms we have been generating so far. A few people are doing it. They do send their Excel sheets to me, regular copies. But if you have been ignoring that particular part, at least do it properly, diligently, honestly for the nishtha pratyayas. If you do not understand this prakriya of nishtha pratyayas, many times generating the form or understanding how a certain form comes up will be very difficult going ahead. अतः इदानीं निष्ठा प्रत्ययोः प्रक्रियायाः अद्य प्रारम्भं कुर्मः. We have studied 10 different, or we have studied in the first part of the course, we studied 10 different steps of the prakriya. We are going to follow these steps one by one. कृद्वृत्तिः इति प्रथमः सोपानः, तदनन्तरं धातुः आगच्छति, धातुः तत्र औपदेशिकस्वरूपमस्ति, औपदेशिकस्वरूपात् इत्संज्ञालोपः भवति, तदनन्तरं कुत्रचित् प्राकृतिककार्यं भवितुम् अर्हति, धात्वादेशः इत्येतत् सर्वं. After the prakritika you get a dhatu. In the anticipation of the krut prakriyas, certain transformation happens. Later on, the krut pratyay is attached. You get idagama or vikarana pratyaya. Before that, uppapada can happen, but in this case, uppapada will not happen. Right now, there could be an idagama because tavatu or ardhadatuka pratyayas. Then there will be anga karyam, uttarapadadhikara karyam, varna karyam, finally tripadi karyam, and the krudanta will be generated. Now, out of these particular steps, what we are going to do in today's class is we will complete till step number 5, and we will do some initial aspects of the step number 6, the idagama. Whatever I am going to teach from this point in time towards the end of today's class has already been taught. The class can also be quite small probably, because if I quickly revise through the slides that have already been taught, it might even end up early. From next class onwards, I will be focusing on newer things associated with idagama for the nishtha pratyayas. So we will probably take 3 or 4 classes for idagama, probably 3 more or 4 more classes for anga karya, and 4 or 5 more classes for tripadi karya. Bunch of karyas, like 30, 40 sutras, new sutras we have to study in this whole process. So prarabhamahe, tatra prathamaha sopanaha, prathamaha binduho asti krudvrittihi. By the way, this reminds me, I have also told this to a few students individually over email, but I would like to say this again and again over here. Please do not deviate from this particular chart. I have seen people submitting the homework, writing the steps in whatever order they want. That is not acceptable. This is not a luxury, or this is not an option. This is a compulsory flow chart that has to be followed. So you have to do krudvritti first, then dhatu, then prakritika karyam, then whatever uppapada then idagama. Sometimes people have done varna karya before anga karya and tripadi karya all the way at the beginning of the prakriya and all that. That is not acceptable. You have to follow the flow chart precisely the way it has been taught, and only then you have a chance of mastery over the krit prakriya. So prarabhamahe, we are going to follow the same chart again. Tatra prathamaha binduhu, prathamaha sopanha krudvrittihi. Krudvritti ityukte kim? Tatra कृदन्तस्य व्याख्या निर्माणम् अर्थः कथं भवति इति वाक्येन तस्य निर्देशः करणीयः. So in the previous class we have studied so many different ways in which the kta and the tavatu pratyayas can be used. Each of them will have its own vritti. Etesham sarvesham sankalanam atra asmin patre kritam asti. Kramena pathamaha. I will quickly explain each of them in a minute or so. It should be easy. There is nothing new. Everything has already been taught. So तत्र प्रारंभे भूतकालस्य विषये पश्यामः. तत्र चत्वारः स्तम्भाः आसन्. भूतकालः, वर्तमानकालः, आदिकर्मणि तथा कालसामान्यः. अनेनैव प्रकारेण क्रमेण गच्छामः. तत्र भूते कर्तरी तवतु प्रत्ययः भवितुमर्हति. अपाठीत् इति पठितवान्. अपठत् इति अपि वक्तुं शक्यते. सामान्य भूतकालस्य निर्देशार्थं मया अत्र लुङ्लकारः प्रयुक्तः अस्ति. लुङ्लकारस्य रूपाणि सम्यक् रूपेण न स्मर्यन्ते चेत् तत्र लङ्लकारस्य रूपाणि प्रयुज्य अपि वृत्तिं लेखितुं शक्यते. सो अपाठीत् नो चेत् अपठत् इति पठितवान्. अभवत् नो चेत् अभूत् इति भूतवान्. अपश्यत् नो चेत् अद्राक्षीत् इति दृष्टवान्. So for the tavatu pratyay, the vrittis has to be written like this. You take the lang lakara or lung lakara prathama purusha ekvachana form and say iti and add the final form over there. You can say pathitavan, you can say pathitavati, masculine, feminine, even napumsaka is also okay. Bhute kartarikta pratyayah, pratyayah kartari asti, ataha kartari lakarah atra prayoktavyaha. Agachat no chet agamat iti gataha. Aglasit iti glanaha. अध्यशैष्ट इति अधिशयितः. भूते क्त प्रत्ययः भावकर्मणोः अपि भवितुमर्हति. अपाठी इति पठितम्. अत्र अपठ्यत भावकर्मः अस्ति, भावकर्म अस्ति, अतः कर्मणि प्रयोगः. अपठ्यत इति पठितम् इति अपि वक्तुं शक्यते. अभूयत इति भूतम इति अपि वक्तुं शक्यते, अदृश्यत इति अपि वक्तुं शक्यते, अदर्शी नो चेत् अदृश्यत इति दृष्टम. So these are all usages in the bhutakala. You can have the ktavatu pratyaya in the kartari sense, kta pratyaya for some cases in the kartari sense, for all other cases, or in fact for all cases in the karmani sense. Tadantaram vartamana kalam pravishamashchet kartari kta pratyaya. Whenever you have a kartari pratyaya vidhanam, the lakar must be kartari. Whenever you have karmani pratyaya vidhanam, the lakara must be karmani. So somebody is asking, what are these forms? Apati, abhavi, adarshi. They are karmani lung lakara forms. So lung lakara in the karmani sense, they don't get the yak vikarana pratyaya because it is an ardhadhatuka lakara. So you get forms like apati, abhavi, adarshi. They are complex. They will be complex for many of you. That's why I said, if you do not understand these, you can just say apathyata iti pathitam, bhuyata iti bhutam. Use the lung lakar with the proper kartari or the karmani usage. So it's very simple. When you see bhute over here, you should use the lang lakar, or if you know, you should use the lung lakar. When you see kartari over here, you should use the kartari lakar. When you see karmani over here, you should use the karmani form. So here, for example, you need to use the kartari prayoga of lang lakar. So that's apathat, apathatam, apathan. These are the kind of usages that you will use over here. Bhute kartarikta pratyaya, again it is kartari and bhutakala, so exactly same as the previous one. So agachat, agachatam, agachan ete prayogaha atra bhavitum arhanti. In the third one, because it is bhava karmanoho, you cannot use agachat, you have to go to the karmani. Now in karmani, the lat lakar form will be gamyate, gamyete, gamyante. The corresponding lang lakar forms, because you are in the bhutakala over here, will be agamyata, agamyatam, agamyanta. So then you say apati or apathyata. These are the forms that you will use. What I have written on the slide are the lung lakar forms specifically for the bhute. This is only to stay technically correct. You do not have to use lung lakar forms. You can use lung lakar forms if that helps. Just understand that tatra lung lakare anadyatana iti kashchana amshah asti, saha tatra agre patthitavan iti vadamashchet anadyatana iti amshah tatra na spashti bhavati. As long as you are aware of that, for this particular course, it is perfectly okay to use the lung lakara forms to write the vrittis. Agre vartamane kartarikta pratyaya. Now this is simple. Vartamana kala and use the normal kartari. So tvarate iti tvaritaha, tushyati iti tushtaha, namriyate iti amrutaha, and so on. Again, there is a question on the previous 3 points over here. Can I use the lit lakara? Yes, you can use the lit lakara. Atra lit api bhavitum arhati, lung api bhavitum arhati, lung api bhavitum arhati. Technically, the most correct one is lung. So if you are hell-bent on using lit, you may as well use lung. So the only reason why I'm saying though it's okay not to use lung, because these forms are complex for people to comprehend, to remember, to use. So if the complexity of the forms is the problem, you should use, or you can use the lung lakara. If complexity of the forms is not a concern, then you can definitely use lung lakara itself. So there is no particular reason of explicitly using a lit lakara over here. That's why I was not referring to lit lakara at all. अग्रे वर्तमाने कर्मणि त प्रत्ययः पुनः वर्तमानकालः अस्ति, लट् लकारः प्रयोक्तुं शक्यते, लट् लकारस्य प्रयोगं कर्तुं शक्नुमः, कर्मणि अस्ति, अतः तत्र पूज्यते, ज्ञायते, इष्यते, रक्ष्यते एतादृशानि रूपाणि भवितुम् अर्हन्ति. आदिकर्मणि कर्तरिक्तवतु प्रत्ययः, because it is adikarmani, you can just use a lang lakar over here or lung lakar over here. Prakarshit, remember this typical usages is with the pra as the upasarga, though there is no rule like that. Prakarshit iti prakrutavan, prabhukshit iti prabhuktavan, and so on. When it comes to adikarmani, we restrict ourselves to the usages in the commentaries, because we never know what kind of kriya is can legitimately be considered as adikarmani. So let's restrict ourselves to the usages given in the literature or usages given in the vyakhyanas. Similarly, adikarmani kartarikta pratyaya, this was kartariktavatu, kartarikta, the vritti will be same because adikarmani and kartari is what defines the vritti. So prakarshit iti prakrutaha, prabhukshit iti prabhuktaha, and so on. The same, instead of prakrutavan I wrote prakrutaha. आदिकर्मणि भावकर्मणोः उक्त प्रत्ययः, so prakari iti prakrudam. This is again karmani lung, just like a party it will be a kari, a bhoji, and so on. If this is difficult, you can just use the normal akriyata in the bhavakarmanoh lang lakar. So prakari iti prakrutam, prabhoji iti prabhuktam, and so on. अग्रे अस्ति कालसामान्ये अधिकरणे क्त प्रत्ययः कालसामान्यः अस्ति, अतः तत्र सामान्यरूपेण लट् लकारः मया प्रयुक्तः अस्ति. अधिकरणे क्त प्रत्ययः भुज्यते अस्मिन् इति भुक्तम्. Here, because it is adhikarane and there is no particular kartari or karmani given, it is perfectly fine to use any prayoga in the vritti. You can say bhunkte asmin iti bhuktam, or you can say bhujyate asmin iti bhuktam. Similarly, you can say hasati asmin iti hasitam, or you can say hasyate asmin iti hasitam. Either of the prayogas is acceptable, because the sutra, because the vritti doesn't talk anything specifically about kartari or bhava karmano or whatever. So atra bhujyate asmin iti bhuktam, no chet bhunkte asmin iti bhuktam, hasyate asmin iti hasitam, or hasati asmin iti hasitam, ubhayata bhavitumarhati. तथैव कालसामान्ये भावेक्त प्रत्ययः, अत्रापि मया किञ्चित् भेदम् अनुसृत्य तत्र ल्युट् प्रत्ययेन सह वृत्तिः प्रदर्शिता अस्ति. हसनम् इति हसितं, गमनम् इति गतं. यू कैन आल्सो से गम्यते इति गतं, हस्यते इति हसितं, एंड सो ऑन. भावे अस्ति, अतः तत्र भावे प्रयोगः एव प्रयोक्तव्यः. अनेन प्रकारेण भिन्नानां कृदन्तानां वृत्तिः एतेषु एकं प्रयोगम एकां पद्धतिम उपयुज्य लेखितुं शक्यते. Go through this slide once, twice, thrice, and try out your hands for certain specific, say for example, take a stotram, take say one chapter of Bhagavad Gita, whatever. Somebody has sent a very beautiful collection of Sankshepa Ramayanam, first 100 shlokas of Ramayanam. They have written the vrittis and the sutras corresponding to that for those particular 100 shlokas. Very beautiful collection. So take a small sample like this, a piece of literature, and try it out for like 5, 10, 15, 20 such the pratyayanta words, and it will be very clear to you. Please do that exercise. So that is about krud vritti. Sarvesham उत्तराणां प्रारंभः प्रक्रियां लिखत इति प्रश्नः अस्ति चेत् सर्वेषाम् उत्तराणां प्रारंभः तत्र कृद्वृत्त्या सह एव करणीयः. If there is no कृद्वृत्ति, you are not actually writing the prakriya properly, because the whole premise is that there has to be a samarthya, there has to be a paraspara sambandha between certain words, and only after that those words will combine together to form a single word. So pachati iti ityatra eva pachakah iti shabdah siddhyati. So you have to start with the vritti and go ahead. अनेन प्रकारेण तत्र प्रथमः बिन्दुः अस्ति कृद्वृत्तिः. तत्र कृद्वृत्तेः प्रायः कृद्वृत्तौ प्रायः उपपदं तथा धातुः इति भागद्वयं भवितुमर्हति, परन्तु अत्र क्त तथा क्तवतु प्रत्ययोः विषये उपपदस्य चिन्ता उपपदस्य विषयः नास्ति, चिन्तनं नावश्यकम्. अतः अत्र केवलं धातुः. अग्रिमः सोपानः, द्वितीयः सोपानः इत्संज्ञालोपः तथा अनैमित्तिकं प्राकृतिककार्यम्. So all that is already being explained earlier in many of the previous classes. I'll still revise it once again for the sake of clarity. Somebody is asking me a question on what is this. Can you explain this last part over here once again? Sure. So hasanam iti hasitam ityatra hasanam iti krud vrittihi asti. So this is a vritti hasanam iti, and the final form is hasitam. Because it is used in the bhave sense, I can use another bhavavachaka pratyaya called lyut to give the vritti. It is not necessary to use a tinanta to give a vritti. You can always use another krudanta to give a vritti. So for example, here in bhute kartarikta pratyaha, you can actually say gatavan iti gataha. That is also acceptable. You can use a ktavatu pratyaya to give a vritti, and the final form will be kta pratyaya. So gatavan iti gataha iti api atra samichinam. Tathaiva atrapi hasanam iti hasitam. The act of laughing is called hasitam. The act of going is called gatam. अत्र तिङन्तेन अपि वृत्तिः भवितुमर्हति. गम्यते इति गतं, हस्यते इति हसितम् इति अपि भवितुमर्हति. अग्रिमः सोपानः इत्संज्ञालोपः प्राकृतिककार्यं. झटिति सूत्राणि पठित्वा अग्रे गच्छामः. उपदेशे जनुनासिक इत हलन्त्यम् आदिर्निटुडवः इर इत्संज्ञा वाचा इति वार्तिकेन इर इति समुदायस्य इत्संज्ञा भवति सर्वेषां तस्य लोपः इति लोपः भवति. So there are a bunch of more sutras in the itsamnya prakaranam. They are not used for dhatus. So shaf pratyayasya chutu lashakvat adhite etani sutrani dhatushu vidyamananam varnanam itsamnya vidhane na prayujjante. Only specific set of sutras are used for verbs. Upadeshaya janunasika ita halantyam and adiriyuduravaha. Even na vibhakta tusma is related to vibhakti, which is nothing to do with the dhatus. So adiriyuduravaha. And then there is a vartika ira itsamnya vacha. So you have e shuchir or bhidir chidir ityatra ir iti shabda samudayasya prathagrupena itsamnya bhavati. You do not make a separate itsamnya of e over here. So if you look at e shuchir, it is not halantyam and upadeshya janunasika ita. R and E do not have a separate itsamnya. Ir as a standalone entity has an itsamnya. There is a different prayojana of having ir as an itsamnya. If you incorrectly end up having itsamnya of the ikara, you will be forced to do the numagama over here by iditonum dhatoho. So you are not allowed to do that. Refasya prathagrupena itsamnya nasti, ikarasya prathagrupena itsamnya nasti. Ir iti samudayasya hrasva ikarah asti anunasikah asti. Ir iti sampurnasya samudayasya itsamnya bhavati. So this particular e shuchir actually has two itsamnyaka components. There is the dirgha ikara which is sitting at the beginning, and there is a ir which is sitting towards the end. So two different itsamnyaka components are there. अनेन प्रकारेण एतेषां सर्वेषां इत्संज्ञा भवति तस्य लोपः इत्यनेन सूत्रेण इत्संज्ञकवर्णस्य लोपः भवति. So that's the itsamnya vidhanam. After that there is a prakritika karyam. Prakritika karyam by definition has to be done in the prakritika avastha, original state of the dhatu. As soon as itsamnya is removed, even before any pratyaya comes, you have to do the prakritika karya. Look at the flowchart again. The pratyaya does not appear before step number 4. We are still at step number 2. There is no reference of pratyaya over here. I have seen people writing the prakriya as stha plus kta, then giving stha plus kta. Not acceptable. First you say stha, then it becomes stha. Dhatvadesha saha ityanena stha ityasya stha iti tatra parivartanam bhavati. Tadanantaram tatra pratyaya vidiyate. Pratyaya comes on step number 4. I mean, if you're expert in grammar, it's okay to do this as long as you know what you're doing. But at least for this particular course, it is important to follow these steps. Otherwise, you mess up with these steps and then you come to me asking why my prakriya is going wrong. And the obvious answer is you are messing up with the steps. So tatra prarambhe pratyaya vidhanat purvameva etat prakritika karyam karniyam धात्वादेशः सह धातोः आदौ विद्यमानस्य षकारस्य सकारादेशः भवति. ष्टत्वनिवृत्तौ ष्टुत्वनिवृत्ति भवति, णत्वस्यापि निवृत्ति भवति. सो निमित्तापाये नैमित्तिकस्य पायः इति अस्माभिः पूर्वं दृष्टम्. All this has already been taught. Shtha becomes a stha, shidha becomes a sidha, shuniha becomes a sniha, so sh becomes sa, na becomes na, shana becomes a sana, sh becomes a sa, na becomes a na. So this is all nivrutti. The vartika that we have studied in this context, tub dhatu shtivu shvashkati nam sattva pratishedho vaktavyaha, specific set of two dhatus, shtiva and shvashka. For these two dhatus, the sh remains as sh. The murdhanya sh remains as the murdhanya sh, does not get converted to sa. So shtiva becomes shtyuta. How does it become shtyuta is a different story. All that you have to observe is a sh remains as a sh. So shtiva becomes shtyuta, shvashka becomes shvashkita. So sh remains as sh. There is another point in this particular vartikam, sub dhatu shtivu shvashkatinam. So basically sub subantat nochet pratipadikaat yaha dhatu siddhati षण्मुखाय इति कश्चन षण्मुखः इव आचरति षण्मुखायते. तादृशः धातुः अस्ति चेत् तस्मिन् धातौ विद्यमानस्य शकारस्य अनेन सूत्रेण सकारादेशः न भवति. So this particular transformation is only limited to dhatus that are there in the dhatu patha and not the nama dhatus or sub dhatus that are generated using the sanadi pratyayas applied on the प्रातिपदिक्स। अग्रिमं सूत्रं णोनः, क्षम्यतां, णोनः धातोः आदेणस्य नः स्यात्। So ण at the beginning of the dhatu becomes न, णद becomes नद, णी becomes नी। बहूनि उदाहरणानि अस्माभिः दृष्टानि। तदनन्तरम् इदितोनुं धातोः, इदितः धातोः नमागमः भवति, वदि becomes वन्द, कपि becomes कम्प and so on। एतेषां सर्वेषां प्रयोजनमपि अस्माभिः अधीतं। यदि प्रक्रियायाः प्रथमसोपाने एव षकारस्य सकारादेशः भवति तर्हि धातुपाठे किमर्थं षकारः उक्तः? यदि प्रक्रियायाः प्रारम्भे एव णकारस्य नकारादेशः भवति तर्हि प्रारम्भे एव किमर्थं णकारः उक्तः इति सर्वम् अस्माभिः पूर्वेषु वर्गेषु सम्यक् रूपेण अधीतमस्ति। पुनरेकवारं न वक्तुमिच्छामि। अग्रे गच्छामः। प्राकृतिककार्याणि, the next step, the स्वार्थिक प्रत्यय विधानम। We have seen a bunch of sutras in this context. गुप तिज खिद्भ्यः सन्, तत्र आहत्य त्रयः धातवः गुप तिज कित एतेभ्यः स्वार्थे सन् प्रत्ययः भवति। So गुप plus सन, again this is स्वार्थे, it does not depend on the kt pratyaya, it is compulsory even before the kt pratyaya comes in the picture. So gup plus सन becomes jugupsa, then finally jugupsita iti rupam siddhyati। कृमिकुलचितं लाला किन्निन्नं विगन्धि जुगुप्सितं, very well known shloka of Bhartrihari। Tija becomes titiksha, then it will become titikshita. Kita will become chikitsa, it will become chikitsita। So all these intermediate forms, jugupsa, titiksha, chikitsa, एतानि सर्वाणि आतिदेशिक धातवः एते सर्वे सन्ति। एतेषाम् अग्रे क्त प्रत्यय विधानं कृत्वा अन्तिमं रूपं सिद्ध्यति। अत्र गुपनिन्दायां तिजक्षमायां कित व्याधि प्रतीकारे इत्यत्र अर्थविशेषः ज्ञातव्यः। सो गुपु गोपने निन्दायां च, so there are multiple meanings even for tija, kita, nivase, रोगापनयने, व्याधि प्रतीकारे, there are multiple possible meanings for each of these dhatus। tija nishane क्षमायां च, only specific meanings get this san pratyaya, other meanings don't get this particular san pratyaya। So gupa rakshane iti gupa gopane iti vadamश्चेत् तत्र san pratyaya न भवति, तत्र निन्दायाम् इति वदामश्चेदेव सन् प्रत्ययः भवति। तिज निशाने इति वदामश्चेत् सन् प्रत्ययः न भवति, क्षमायाम् इति वदामश्चेदेव सन् प्रत्ययः भवति। अनेन प्रकारेण विशिष्ट अर्थेषु एव एते यदा धातवः यदा प्रयुज्यन्ते तदा तेभ्यः सन् इति प्रत्ययः स्वार्थे विधीयते। अग्रिमं सूत्रं, द इमीडिएट नेक्स्ट वन, मान बधदांशाभ्यो दीर्घश्चाभ्यासस्य मान जिज्ञासायां, दिस गुप इज अ टाइपिंग मिस्टेक, नीड्स टू बी रिमूव्ड। मान जिज्ञासायां बध वैरूप्ये दान आर्जवे शान निशाने, अगेन स्पेसिफिक मीनिंग्स आर गिवन। एतेषु अर्थेषु धातोः स्वार्थे सन् प्रत्ययः भवति, प्रक्रियायाम् अभ्यासस्य दीर्घादेशः भवति। सो मान बिकम्स मीमांस, बध बिकम्स बीभत्स, dana becomes didansa, shana becomes shishamsa, and then the kta pratyaya will begin। अत्र किं स्मर्तव्यं, परीक्षायामपि एतादृशः प्रश्नः आसीत्, गुप्तिच्किद्भ्यः सन् तथा मान बधदांशाभ्यो दीर्घश्चाभ्यासस्य इत्यत्र पाठितः सन् प्रत्ययः न हि आर्धधातुकसंज्ञकः न हि सार्वधातुकसंज्ञकः। It is not attached in the धातोः context, therefore this particular pratyaya is neither ardhadhatuka nor sarvadhatuka। This has to be remembered। अग्रे णिच् प्रत्यय विधानम, सत्यापपाश रूप वीणा तूल श्लोक सेना लोमत्वच वर्म वर्ण चूर्ण चुरादिभ्यो णिच्। सो तत्र एतानि सर्वाणि प्रातिपदिकानि सन्ति, अन्ते एव चुरादिभ्यो णिच् इति चुरादिगणस्य धातुभ्यः स्वार्थे णिच् प्रत्ययः विधीयते। सो णिच् इज नॉट अ गणविकरणं, स्वार्थे णिच् प्रत्ययः विधीयते। तदनन्तरं शप् इति विकरण प्रत्ययः अवश्यं भवति प्रक्रियायां। सो चुर प्लस णिच् चोरी, दिस इज आतिदेशिक धातु। गण प्लस णिच् गणि इति आतिदेशिक धातु। तदनन्तरं क्त इति प्रत्ययः अग्रे भवति। विल स्टडी द प्रक्रिया, चोरित गणित इति रूपाणि सिद्ध्यन्ति। कण्डवादिभ्यो यक, कण्डवादिगणस्य शब्दाः द्विविधाः, तत्र धातवः अपि सन्ति प्रातिपदिकाः अपि सन्ति। तेभ्यः कण्वादिगणस्य धातुभ्यः स्वार्थे यक् इति प्रत्ययः विधीयते। कंडूय becomes कंडूयते, सो कंडूय इति आतिदेशिक धातुः, कंडूयित इति रूपम्। मेधाय इति आतिदेशिक धातुः, मेधायित इति रूपम्। अग्रे अस्ति गुपो धूप विक्षिपणिपनिभ्य आयः। सो गुपु रक्षणे धूप संतापे विच्छगतौ पणस्तुतौ पनस्तुतौ एतेषां सर्वेषां विषये स्वार्थे आय प्रत्ययः भवति। सो दीस् आर ऑल स्वार्थिक प्रत्ययस्, वी हैव स्टडीड दिस अगेन एंड अगेन। आयादय आर्धधातुके वा इति आर्धधातुक प्रत्यय विवक्षायां, क्षम्यताम्, आर्धधातुक प्रत्यय विवक्षायाम् एते सर्वे विकल्प्यन्ते। सो you can have gupa plus aya, gopaaya, or normally you can just say gupa plus kta. So for these three sutras, gupu, the three sutras towards the end of the Sanadi Prakaranam, gupu dhupa vichhipanipanibbhya ayaha, riteriyam and kamerning. एतेषां विषये आयादय आर्धधातुके वा इति सूत्रेण एते त्रयः प्रत्ययाः आर्धधातुकप्रत्ययस्य विवक्षायां विकल्प्यन्ते. So in the anticipation of an upcoming ardhadhatuka pratyaya, the aya pratyaya itself retracts itself, doesn't come over there, or suddenly decides not to come over there. So gupu dhupa vichhipanipyanebhya ayaha, you can either add an aya pratyaya or you can do the forms without the aya pratyaya. Ruteriyang, similarly ruti iti dhatuhu, ruti asmin dhatau ikaraha itsamnyakaha nasti, ruti ityatra kevalam uchcharanarthaha ikaraha. Itsamnyakaha asti chet tatra idito num dhato iti numagamasya anishtapattihi bhavet. So it's just an uchcharanartha ikar over there. रुतेरियं अस्मात् सौत्र धातोः स्वार्थे इयंग प्रत्ययः भवति. Again, it is an optional in the anticipation of an upcoming ardhadhatuka pratyaya. So rut can have an iyang giving rise to rutiya. Tatra kta pratyay krute rutiyita iti rupam bhavati. No chet rutita iti kevalam ruta ityasmat kta pratyay krute rutita iti rupam bhavati. Agre kamening kama iti dhatuhu अस्मात् धातोः स्वार्थे णिंग प्रत्यय भवति. Not to be confused with णिच्. णिच् is for the churadi gana, णिंग is over here for the kama dhatu. स्वार्थे णिंग प्रत्यय भवति. पुनः एकवारं आयादयार्ध धातुके वा इति निष्ठा प्रत्ययस्य विवक्षायां सह विकल्प्यते. कम plus णिंग becomes kami. This is आतिदेशिक धातु. Kami plus kta will become kamita, or pakshe kama plus kta will become kanta. अनेन प्रकारेण अत्र सर्वाणि prakritika karyani siddhyanti. So these are the only dhatus for which the initial prakritika karya happens. So it's a good exercise to write this down, handwrite this down once, so that you have these dhatus ready-made before even the kta pratyaya comes in. So any other dhatu passes this filter untouched. All the dhatus that are listed over here, starting from dhatva saha, णोनः, iditonum dhatoho, and all this set of swarthika pratyayas, they get transformed and they pass ahead. Next step is, now you have the dhatu over here. Now the dhatu sees. So at this point, the dhatu doesn't even know that there is a kta pratyaya coming. At this point in time, the dhatu sees that there is a kta pratyaya, there is an ardha dhatuka pratyaya that comes, is going to come. And in order to welcome this particular pratyayam, certain transformation happens. So agrima sopane krut pratyasya vivakshayam parivartanam bhavati. So earlier transformation was even without looking at the pratyaya. The next transformation is now by looking at the pratyaya, but before the pratyaya comes and sits. So pratyaya has still not come. Pratyaya will only come in step number 4 over here. We are still in the step number 2, step number 3 now. It is only the vivaksha, the anticipation of the pratyaya. So krut pratyasya vivakshayam kevala dhatoho krut pratyasya agamanat purvameva kinchit parivartanam bhavati. That parivartana is of two types. There is an ardha dhatuke adhikara in 2.4 and there is an ashiti section in 6.1 adecha upadeshe shiti. Both of these transformations we have seen in two different classes in details. So pratyaya vivakshayam dhatu parivartanam tatra prarambhe dvitiyadhyasya chaturtha pade ardha dhatukadhikara asti. तत्र कानिचन सूत्राणि आवश्यकानि अस्मिन् सन्दर्भे अत्र लिखितानि सन्ति. अदो जग्धिर्ल्यप्तिकिति अदधातोः तकारादौ कित् प्रत्ययस्य विवक्षायां जग्धीति आदेशः भवति. So kt and ktavatu both are takaradis. You don't consider the itsamnyaka letters to understand the adi and anta of a pratyaya. So ad dhato atra kt is takaradi pratyaya. It is a kit pratyaya. So takaradi kit pratyasya vivakshayam अद धातोः जग्धि इति आदेशः भवति. Look at this. ति किति तकारादि कित् प्रत्यय. अदो जग्धिर्ल्यप्ति किति इत्यत्र ल्यप् इति किमर्थम् उक्तम् अस्मिन् विषये अस्माभिः बहु विस्तरेण तत्र चर्चा कृता अस्ति. बहिरङ्गः ल्यप् अन्तरङ्गान् अपि विधीन् बाधते इत्यस्याः परिभाषायाः सम्यक् रूपेण अर्थः अपि तत्र अस्माभिः दृष्टः. अग्रे अस्तेः भूः असधातोः आर्धधातुक प्रत्ययविवक्षायां भू इति आदेशः भवति. ब्रुवो वचिः, ब्रूय gets vach as adesha. So examples are also given. Asa becomes bhu, kta, bhuta. One question that I often get asked, difficulty by many people over here, is when asa gets transformed into bhu, is this bhu same as the bhu dhatu, which is number 1 in the dhatu patha, or is this different? So is this bhu same as the dhatu number 1, bhu sattayam, or is this different? The answer is, on a very technical level, when asa gets transformed into bhu, it is an adesha to start with. So it looks like that particular dhatu, but it is actually an adesha. This adesha now later on gets the dhatu samnya based on sthanivat bhava because asa is a dhatu. So this bhu is different than the bhu occurring in the dhatu patha. That is a separate dhatu on its own. This is an adesha. asa dhatoho bhu iti adeshah bhavati. Tatra sthanivat bhavasya samarthyena asa dhatoho dhatu samnya bhu dhatau api atidishyate. अतः भू इत्यस्मिन् आदेशे अपि अतिदिश्यते. अतः भू इत्यस्य धातु संज्ञा अपि भवति. Similarly over here, bru becomes vacha. This is again different than the vacha dhatu in the dhatu patha. This bru is ubhayapadi. That ubhayapaditva is also imparted on vacha, whereas the vacha in the dhatu patha is only parasmaipadi. So there are differences, and the differences stay as it is. Like when bru becomes vacha, the characteristics of bru are going to be imparted on vacha, whereas the vacha sitting in the dhatu patha is different. Chakshinah khyaya, चक्षिंग धातोः आर्ध धातुक प्रत्ययस्य विवक्षायां ख्याय नो च क्षाय इति आदेशः भवति पाठभेद. Some people say khyaya, some people say kshaya, some say both of them are possible. So chakshin becomes kya or ksha, khyata or kshata. So all these transformations happen before the actual pratyaya even comes and sits. अस्मिन्नेव अधिकारे वा यौ इति सूत्रं तत्र वलादौ आर्धधातुके विकल्पः इष्यते. अज इति धातोः विषये इदं वार्तिकं नो चेत् इदं सूत्रमस्ति. अज धातोः वलादि आर्धधातुकस्य प्रत्ययस्य विवक्षायां वि इति आदेशः भवति, विकल्पेन भवति, विकल्पः इष्यते. सो विकल्पेन भवति. अज becomes aj or vi. So valadi ardhadhatuka pratyas, the ardhadhatuka pratyay that begins with the letter of the val pratyahara. Val pratyahara contains all the letters except for yakara, all the vyanjanas except for yakara. So the kta pratyaya is included in the valadi ardhadhatuka set. Therefore atra vikalpena vi iti adesha bhavati. So aja can become aja or vi plus tavya. Aja, not tavya, plus kta. Aja plus kta becomes ajita. Vi plus kta becomes vita. All these are from the 2.4 ardhadhatuke adhikara, I think class number 11. And then in class number 13 we saw about the ashiti section 6.1. Tatra ashit pratyasya vivakshayam no chet shit pratyasya vivaksha nasti chet kim bhavati. अत्र कानिचन कार्याणि उक्तानि सन्ति. तत्र केवलं कार्यद्वयमेव इदानीम् अस्माभिः आवश्यकम्. आदेशोपदेशे शिति इत्यत्र उपदेशे यः धातु एजन्तः अस्ति तस्य आत्वं भवति. वेरी यूजफुल सूत्रम and it simplifies a lot of prakriya. If a dhatu ends in a or I or o or au, if the dhatu ends in one of these four letters, ejantah ityukte a o I au, एतेषु केनचित् वर्णेन तस्य अन्तः भवति चेत् तस्य आकारादेशः भवति in the anticipation of the kta pratyaya. So or ktavatu pratyaya. So gai becomes ga plus kta will become gita. So any other dhatu which ends in say okara, sho will become, for example, sa. So sho will first become so and then it will become sa. So any particular dhatu that ends in a or I or o or au will become a. Somebody is asking what is this tavya? No, this is a typing mistake. This is a ta pratyaya over here. We are talking about ta pratyaya. I must have copy pasted this and must have failed to change this to tavya. This is aja plus or v plus ta pratyaya asti tavya nasti. Tadanantaram daridrate ardhadhatuke vivakshite alopo vachyaha. We studied this vartika at one point in time when we were talking about I think tavya pratyayas. So daridra iti adadiganasya dhatuhu tatra ardhadhatuka pratyasya vivakshayam akarasya lopaha bhavati. So daridra becomes daridra and then it will become daridrita. So anena prakarena atra pratyay vivakshayam dhatushu parivartanam bhavati. a few more sutras that we studied at that particular point in time. If you go back, it's a useful exercise to go back and listen to these classes. At least refer to your own notes, if not listen to the whole 90-minute session. तत्र मीनाति नीनोति दिङाम्ल्यपि च विभाषालीयतीति सूत्राणि अपि अस्माभिः तत्र अधीतानि, परन्तु एतयोः सूत्रयोः अत्र प्रयोजनं नास्ति इति एव अत्र स्पष्टीकृतम् अस्ति. So I haven't given examples, I have just made a note over here that एतयोः सूत्रयोः अस्मिन् सन्दर्भे प्रयोजनं नास्ति. So you can even ignore that and go ahead. After doing all this, this is now the preparatory work, and now the dhatu is ready to welcome the krut pratyaya. But before the krut pratyaya can enter the whole scenario, the krut pratyaya itself undergoes its samnya lopa. So agre pratyaya vidhanam asti, tatra kta tatha ktavatu iti pratyayo idanim bhavatah nishtha iti sutram iti idanim asmabhi adhitam. So nishtha is only for the bhute. For vartamane there will be different sutram, for adhikarane there will be different sutram, for bhave there will be something different, for adikarmani there is a separate vartika given over there. So multiple sutras are there. Just gave a sample of nishtha iti sutram. So tatra yathamaya uktam prathamam itsamnya lopaha bhavati ta pratyasya kakarasya lashakvatadhita iti itsamnya tasya lopaha iti lopaha ta iti avashishyate. Tavatu pratyaye ukarah itsamnyakah kakarah itsamnyakah ubhayoho itsamnya tasya lopaha iti lopaha tavat iti avashishyate. What is the point of having itsamnyaka kakara and itsamnyaka ukara? We don't need it at this particular time, parantu kinchit chintanam krutva agre gacchamaha chet agre prakriya sulabha bhavati. So let's think why Panini would have added kakara. It is going to be for gunavruddhi nishedha, it is going to be for samprasaranam, it is going to be for upadhanakara lopa aniditam halopadhaya kingiti. So we will think of these when we come to the angakarya. Why is ukara added in ktavatu? It is not there needed in the krudanta prakriya, but it will be needed in the subanta prakriya. Sarvanama sthane pare numagamaha bhavati. So gatavan ityatra numagamaha bhavati. Nochet stritve vivakshite ni iti pratyaya bhavati. Gatavati iti tatra rupam bhavati. Anena prakarena tatra itsamnyaka ukarasya prayojanam bhavati. Now there is a question over here. Somebody is asking. I was about to jump on that. So looks like for every dhatu, the question I'm reading looks like for every dhatu, if we know the kta pratyanta rupam, we can get the tavatu pratyanta rupam. Yes, for 99.999% of the cases. Ubhayoho pratyaya rupani prayena samana ritya eva bhavati. There are only handful of exceptions. Literally, you can count, in single digit numbers where you actually have a difference. So ubhayoho pratyaya rupani prayena samana ritya eva bhavati. Parantu 100% bhavati iti vadamaschet. What is the skill of Panini over there? Or Sanskrit Vyakaranam cannot be so simple, right? So 99.99% of the cases they will be same, but some or the other places you will find a difference. You will not need that difference in your normal conversation, day-to-day, whatever literature, reading and so on. So for all practical purposes, if you're teaching your students, feel free to say that they are identical. Parantu idanim sutranam adhyena vyakaranasya adhyenam kriyamaणम् अस्ति, अतः केचन अपवादाः विशेषरूपेण पाठिताः सन्ति अस्माभिः अग्रे गत्वा पठ्यन्ते. So प्रौढ versus प्रौढवत, वह धातु अस्ति, उह धातु अस्ति, तत्र उह तस्य ऊढ इति भवति चेत् प्र प्लस ऊढ प्रौढ इति वार्तिकेन तत्र वृद्धिः भवति, परन्तु अत्र प्रौढवत प्र प्लस उ गुणः भवति, प्रौढवत इति भवति. श्रापाके इति धातु अस्ति, द्वितीयगणस्य अदादिगणस्य धातु अस्ति, तस्य क्त प्रत्ययान्तरूपं भवति श्रुत, ktavatu pratyayantरूपं भवति श्राणवत. So shrana is also an acceptable form. So shrana and shranavata is also correct, but shruta is also another acceptable form. So some such changes will be there, very little, less than 10 or 15, where, and most of these are actually nipatanas. So for example, shruta and so on are actually nipatanas, where he explicitly writes down a separate kta pratyanta form which is not propagated to ktavatu. So atra प्रायः सर्वेषाम् उभयो प्रत्ययो रूपाणि समानरीत्या एव भवन्ति इति वदामः. प्रत्यय विशेषः, specific qualities of the pratyaya, we have always been studying this. ardhadhatukah, ityobhyah, haladi, valadi, jhaladi. This jhaladi is important because jhaladi kit pratyaya se karyani santi. Takaradi is important because takaradi kit pratyaya se karyani santi. And more important is kit, which completely imbalances the entire equation. Kit pratyayas are always risky pratyayas in the entire prakriya. So they always cause some or the other trouble. We'll see that in the upcoming classes. So tavatu pratyaya ugit pratyaya api asti. So that completes step number 4. After this itsamnyalopa, you don't have pratyadesha. Pratyadeshas are restricted to yuvoranakau and so on. So pratyadesha atra nasti. Idanim yojane siddhaha krut pratyayah krut pratyam apekshamaanaha dhatuhu एतयोः अत्र योजनं कृत्वा प्रातिपदिकम् इत्युक्ते कृदन्तं भवितुम् अर्हति. If there is an upapada at this particular point in time, upapada samasa can happen. Upapada can combine with the dhatu and krud together to form upapada samasa over here. However, in this particular context, there is no upapada, so there will not be any upapada samasa. Let me go back on the previous slide. Somebody is actually asking, Shrutavan is wrong or Shrutavan is correct. So the point is, I'm not talking about the Shru Shrunoti Dhatu. That's a different Dhatu. If you're talking about Shru Shrunoti Dhatu, there is a Shrutam and Shrutavan. These forms are correct, but that's Sh plus R plus U. That's not Sh plus Ru, by the way. So it's Sh plus R plus U Shrutam, and then there is Shrutavan. That's a different dhatu, not to be confused. This is Shra. Let's actually go to the dhatu patha and see if I can. This is the one that I'm saying, not adad. This one, sorry, Shra Pake. So this is adadi ganasya Shra Pake iti dhatu asti. That is the particular dhatu that I was talking over here. This particular dhatu, Panini gives the ta pratyayanta form as a shruta, whereas tavatu pratyayanta form comes out to be Shrana Vata. I should have mentioned this, forgot. This has nothing to do with Shru Shrunoti Dhatu. That's completely different. There is one more question over here. I don't understand this, but Panini does not need both ta and ktavatu pratyayas. He could have given the final form for special dhatus. Well, Panini did not give ta and tavatu. They were in the language. Like patha and pathitavan are two different forms of the language, and he has to justify them. So he created two different pratyayas, one as ta and other as ktavatu, with different meanings, and the context is different, meaning is different, everything is different. Thankfully, the forms are same. Otherwise, it was another 20 more classes for us. Thankfully, you have almost equivalent forms. Anyway, agre upapada samasah, atra upapada samasa naiva bhavitum arhati, atra upapadam nasti. So most of the, as I mentioned earlier, in our list of sutras, sheet number 3 was all upapadas. We have crossed sheet number 3 now. In sheet number 4, it's a mix of upapadas and non-upapadas. So some places there will be upapadas. Brahma Bruna Vrutreshu Kvipa Sukarma Vapa Mantrapanyeshu Krata Sarvatra Upapadam Asti. Parantu Nishtha iti vadamaschet. Suyajorn Vanipa iti vadamaschet. Jiryate Ratruna iti vadamaschet upapadam nasti. So idanim atra upapadam nasti. Kevala dhatoho eva bhavitum arhatah. Upapadam na avashyakam. Upapada samasah na bhavati. What it means is that if you see constructs like Upapatitaha or Ahihataha, Gorakshitam, Vrishchikabhitaha, these are not Upapada samasas. These are actually separate krudantas being constructed. Patita is a separate krudanta which is now being combined with Kupam to create a Dvitiya Tatpurusha. Ahinahataha is Ahihataha. Gave Rakshitam, kept aside for a cow. Gave Rakshitam iti go Rakshitam. The Rakshitam is a separate krudanta which is undergoing a samasa with Gave. Compare and contrast this with Kumbhakara. In Kumbhakara, there is no separate krudanta called Kara which is undergoing a samasa with Kumbha. It is a single entity, Kumbha plus Kru plus Ana, giving rise to Kumbhakara. So that Kumbha is embedded in the prakriya all the way from the beginning. On the other hand, over here, whether it is Go Rakshitam or whether it is Vyagra Rakshitam or whether it is Pashu Rakshitam, you can always form a samasa over here, given that you have a separate Rakshitam entity which can be combined with some other Pratipatikam or with some other Subandha over here. So Ahina Hataha ityatra Hata iti bhinnaha Kridanta Shabdaha. Gave Rakshitam ityatra Rakshitam iti bhinnaha Kridanta Shabda atra kutrapi upapada samasah nasti. Upasargaha asti chet tatra gati samasah asti iti uchyate tadapi maya purvam pathitam. Avagataha ityatra Gataha iti eva tatra vritti lekhaniya. So Gataha, what is the vritti for Gataha? Agamyata iti Gataha. So then you combine it with agamyat ava and say avagamyat is avagataha. So prakriyayam ava ityasya gama plus ta ityanena gati samahasah bhavati. So you can get a gati samasa if there is an upapada, if there is an upasarga, but there is no question of an upapada, so you do not get the upapada samasa at all. So that completes the first 5 steps of this prakriya till upapada samasa, till step number 5. इदानीम् अग्रे गच्छामः. Step number 6, कृत् प्रत्ययस्य इडागमः. The sixth step can either have a vikarana pratyaya or idagama. Vikarana pratyaya is for sarvadhatuka lakaras, idagama is for ardhadhatuka. Sorry, vikarana pratyaya is for sarvadhatuka pratyayas, idagama is for ardhadhatuka pratyayas. Where dakta and tavatu are ardhadhatuka pratyayas. Therefore, you get an idagama over here. This idagama of Kridanta prakaranam is extreme, or sorry, the idagama of nishtha pratyayas is extremely complex. We are going to spend at least 3 or 4 more classes talking about idagama. इदानीम् अद्यतनवर्गे किं कुर्मः? अस्माकम् अभ्यासक्रमे पूर्वमेव 16th क्लास इत्यत्र इडागम विषयकं सामान्य ज्ञानम् अस्माभिः पूर्वं प्राप्तमासीत्. Whatever I discussed in class number 16, I also sent an email on the group. If possible, please rewatch class number 16. So whatever I discussed in class number 16, I'm going to quickly revise that material in next 20 minutes to bring the context or set the context of the nishtha pratyayas over here, so that from the next class we can have new sutras which are specific to the idagama of the nishtha pratyayas that we will discuss. So तत्र प्रारभामहे. निष्ठा प्रत्ययोः इडागमस्य विषये अध्ययनस्य प्रारम्भे अष्टाध्याय्याम् इडागम प्रकरणं कुत्र विद्यते तत् पश्यामः. So idagama itself is a huge topic. Probably a separate course is deserved, or it deserves a separate discussion, separate treatment, separate course on its own. There are a total of 71 sutras in the idagama prakaranam. 7.2.8 इत्यतः आरभ्य 7.2.78 नेड वशिकृति इत्यस्मात् आरभ्य अत्र अस्ति किल ईड अस्ति, न इट वशिकृति, नेड वशिकृति इत्यस्मात् आरभ्य ईड जनोर्ध्वे च 7 to 78. This entire section is where Panini has combined everything related to the idagama. Now, this particular section of idagama is very beautifully divided into 2 subsections. You can actually see a very nice ordering between the two, between these particular sutras. Tatra prarambhe vidyamanani kanichana sutrani idagamस्य निषेधस्य विषये वदन्ति. Sutras from 7 to 8 up to 7 to 30, around 23 sutras in this particular section. So 20 plus sutras, they talk about the nishedha of the idagama. It can be a compulsory nishedha or an optional nishedha, but there is a nishedha of the idagama. And sutras towards the end, so end means immediately, this ends at 30 and starting from 35 to 78. So around 40-45 sutras, they talk about the actual idagama. So it's actually weird. First he talks about the nishedha and then he talks about the rules of idagama, but that's how it's being arranged. So prarambhe vidyamanani sutrani idagama nishedhasya विषये वदन्ति, तदन्तरं विद्यमानानि सूत्राणि इडागमस्य विषये वदन्ति. In both cases there is nishedha or vidhana, can be nitya or vaikalpika. So it can be an optional nishedha or a compulsory nishedha. It can be an optional vidhana or a compulsory vidhana. There are 4 sutras in between. It's only 4. I mean, the diagram appears as if it's a middle chunk, but it's not like that. It's only 4 sutras, 31, 32, 33, 34. These are nothing but the nipatanas. So you have the nishedha in the beginning, you have the idagama vidhanam towards the end, madhye tatra nipatanam asti. Idagama vishayakani atra vaidika nipatanani. Not even just nipatana, the ones that are restricted for usage in the Vedas. So idagama vishayakani tatra vaidika nipatanani atra madhye uktani santi. So there are a total of 71 sutras in this particular section. And this is the general idagama, not necessarily the Kridanta related idagama. So some sutras are used in Kridanta prakaranam, some will be used in sanadi pratyayas, some will be used for say lut lakar, some lit lakar, some other situations also idagama is possible. So this is a general entire idagama as its own is being captured over here. The funny thing is that out of these 70 odd sutras present over here, 35 sutras are explicitly for the nishtha pratyayas. The 50% of the bunch of these sutras will be used in the nishtha pratyayas. So Ashtadhyayam Idagama Prakarane Yani Vidyamanani Prayah Saptati Sutrani Eteshu 50% Sutrani Nishtha Pratyay Vishekani Santi. So that itself tells us the complexity or chaos of the prakriya of the nishtha pratyayas. So next, the reason why I am saying that we need 4 more classes for studying idagama is because we have to go over all these 35 sutras one by one and understand them. So Ashtadhyayam idagama prakarane vidyamanani 50% sutrani nishtha pratyayoho prakriyayam prayujyante etesham adhyanam agrima vargat prarabhya kurmaha. Now, out of these, so 50% is actually 35 sutras. We have a total of 70 sutras approximately over here. Half of that is 35. Now, out of this 35 sutras, 15 sutras have already been taught in the class number 16 all the way in Khanda 1. So that was the reason I insisted on that email that if possible, please watch that video once again. Because if you would have watched that video, then you already know 15 out of those 35 sutras, which means only 20 new sutras will be taught over next few classes. So whatever those 15 odd sutras we studied, I would like to do a quick summary of them today, not necessarily all, but whatever we could have, we can think in the context. So I would like to do a quick summary of those 15 sutras today. If you would have, whatever, rewatched the video number 16, it will be like quick recap for you. If once we do the summary today, from tomorrow's class onwards, we will start with the new set of sutras that are specifically for the nishtha pratyayas. There is one question over here that I'll take and we'll go ahead. So the question reads like this: 7 to 8 is an apavada for 7 to 35. So how come the apavada is some 27 sutras before the utsarga? So it's not one apavada, it's the full set of sutras. So this is actually an apavada section that is appearing. And then there is the vidhana section that is appearing. So it is correct to say that maybe Ned Vashikruti is an apavada for Ardhadhatuka Sed Valadehe. But it's not just Ned Vashikruti. All these sutras are in some way apavada for Ardhadhatuka Sed Valadehe. So now if you look at it, then the numbering doesn't look that bad. So from 8 to 31 is all apavadas. Then later on there are nipatanani, which are apavadas in some way, because if it was not an apavada, there was no reason to give an explicit nipatana. So in some way they are apavadas. So then apavadas are actually extending till 7 to 34. So this is an entire apavada section. And then immediately Ardhadhatuka Sed Valadehe, the vidhana section starts. So it's not, don't compare Ned Vashikruti all the way in 7 to 8 to Ardhadhatuka Sed Valadehe. It's a section that is being represented as an apavada to another section. Agre gacchamaha tatra idagama vishayakani purveshu vargeshu adhitani sutrani tesham idanim punaravartanam kurmaha. We have probably 10-15 minutes. I was thinking the class will end early, but it's not. So ardhadhatukasya idvaladehe sarvaihi jnayate valadi ardhadhatuka pratyasya idagamaha bhavati tatra nedvashikruti कृदंतानां विषये कृत प्रत्ययानां विषये वशादि कृत प्रत्यय अस्ति चेत् इडागमः न भवति. So that's what is written over here. वलादि आर्धधुक प्रत्ययस्य इडागमः भवति, सः प्रत्ययः वशादि कृत प्रत्यय अस्ति चेत् इडागमः निषिध्यते. त and tavatu are both non vashadi. So vasha ends at jabagadash. Ta and tavatu start with the takara, which is all the way towards the later part. So ta and tavatu are valadi but not vashadi. अतः एतयोः विषये इडागमस्य प्रसक्तिः भवितुम् अर्हति. So atra ned vashikruti ittenena निष्ठा प्रत्ययः इडागमः न निषिध्यते, अतः निष्ठा प्रत्यय विषये इडागमः भवितुम् अर्हति. अग्रिमं सूत्रम् एकाचोपदेशेनुदात्तात् अनेन सूत्रेण अनिट् धातूनां विषये उच्यते. सः धातुः यस्मिन् विद्यमानः इत्सम्यक् भिन्नः स्वरः अनुदात्तः अस्ति औपदेशिक अवस्थायां, सः धातुः सः धातु अनिट् अस्ति इति उच्यते. तस्मात् विहितस्य प्रत्ययस्य इडागमः न भवति. So then dhatus get classified. You have a set of anit dhatus which are characterized by an anudatta swara in the aupadeshika form. So yasmin dhatu itsamyaka bhinnaha एकः एव स्वरः विद्यते, सः अनुदात्तः अस्ति. So ekaachah, it's after you remove the itsanyaka letters, there should be a single swara in the dhatu, and that should be anudatta. Such anudattah asti, that dhatu will be called anit, and no pratyaya attached to that dhatu will get an idagama. So tasmat vihitasya ardha dhatuka pratyasya idagamaha na vidhiyate, nishidhyate, and therefore nishtha is not a special case. For nishthas also the idagama does not happen. So smru, for example, the rukar is anudatta, so smru is anit dhatu, smruta, rama, rata, dupachash, pakva, ruya, ruta. So all these are anit dhatus for which the idagama does not happen. These are the three basic sutras. In anit dhatunam vishaye siddhanta kaumudyam anit karika api diyate. So while discussing tavya and tavyat pratyaya, I have taught this anit karika, at least mentioned this over here. तत्र एक कश्चन राइट अप अस्ति, एकः लेखः अस्ति, तस्मिन् लेखे बालमनोरमा व्याख्यान सहितम् अनिट् कारिकायाः मया कृतं विवरणम् अपि स्थापितम् अस्ति. So you have the original karika, you have line by line बालमनोरमा, sandhi vichcheda has been done for you to understand it, and after that, even in simple Sanskrit, I have written the whole description of the entire karika. You can take a look at it and read it later on. तदनन्तरं वेट् धातूनां विषये कानिचन सूत्राणि तस्मिन् वर्गे मया पाठितानि, क्लास नंबर 16. So if you do not remember anything or do not understand anything that I am talking right now, refer back to class number 16. So निष्ठा प्रत्ययोः इडागम विषये तत्र वेट् धातवः कथं कार्यं करोति अस्मिन् विषये वेट् धातूनां प्रथमं कैः सूत्रैः विधानं क्रियते तद्दृष्टम्. So स्वरति सूति सूयति धूयोदितो वा. There is a set of dhatus svru, shung, dhuya, and all the udita dhatus, the dhatus that have digha ukara as its samyaka, which may or may not be at the end. So you have takshu, or you have kshamur, and so on. So all these dhatus are weight dhatus. What is a weight dhatu? Etebhya vihitasya pratyayasya ardha dhatuka pratyasya idagamaha vikalpyate. We have not yet talked about the nishtha. I'm just talking about ardha dhatuka pratyasya idagamaha vikalpyate. Radhadibhyascha is the other sutra. There is a radhadi antargana in the divadi gana. All these dhatus are again weight dhatus. Nira plus kusha is a weight dhatu. And then tisha saha lubharusha rishaha. That sutra was also taught at that point in time. For dhatus isha, shaha, lubha, rusha, risha, the takaradi pratyay makes them weight. So if there is a takaradi pratyay in front of it, tasya pratyayasya vikalpena idagama bhavati. So all the remaining three sutras, every pratyay in front of them is every, in the sense every it eligible pratyaya is weight. For these dhatus saha, lubha, rusha, risha, the takaradi it eligible pratyaya is weight. So etesham sarvesham vishaye agre vidyamanaha nishtha pratyayah vikalpena its idagamam prapnoti iti nishkarshaha bhavitum arhati. Because these three, so the set of dhatus, and also in the last case we have a takaradi pratyaya, and therefore all these sets of dhatus or all these dhatus, they cause the pratyaya to get idagama optionally. Therefore it appears that the ta and tavatu pratyaya sitting in front of it will get the nishtha pratyaya optionally, but that's not how it happens. We have also studied this kill all switch called yasya vibhasha, yasya kvachit vibhashaya id vihitaha tato nishthayaha it na syat. If this is Greek or Latin, please refer back to class number 16. Yadi dhatoho vihitasya kaschana vishishta pratyasya idagamaha vikalpyate tarhi tasmat dhatoho vihitayoho nishtha pratyayoho idagamaha na bhavati. So anytime a dhatu is getting an optional idagama, the nishtha pratyayas, they completely shut down the scope of idagama. So idagama nishtha pratyo vishay na bhavati. So for example, weight dhatus, they do not get, and the nishtha pratyayas does not get an idagama. Or udit dhatus. For udit dhatus, the ktva pratyaya gets an optional idagama. So udito va iti sutrena udit dhatunam vishaye ktva pratyasya vikalpena idagama bhavati. As soon as some other pratyaya gets an optional idagama, the nishtha pratyayas shut down the idagama completely. So nishtha pratyayas are always in favor of not doing an idagama. Anytime they find a chance, they will not do an idagama. So yasya vibhasha iti sutrena kimuchyate? If some other pratyaya gets an optional idagama, the nishtha pratyayas don't get an idagama. So then udit dhatunam vishaye twa pratyasya vikalpena idagamah bhavati, atah nishtha pratyayo idagamah nishidyate. Then there are a couple of more sutras that explicitly block the idagama of nishtha pratyayas. Shvidito nisthayam aditascha vibhasha bhavadi karmanoho sutrani sarvani etani purvam adhitani. If idit dhatu asti chet nishtha pratyay idagama na bhavati. Adit dhatu asti chet आकारः इत्सम्यक् अस्ति यिमिदा यित्वरा आदित् धातु अस्ति चेत् निष्ठा प्रत्ययोः भावादिकर्मणोः विकल्पेन इडागमः भवति अन्यत्र न भवति. So you have couple examples over here. Tu o shvi, shvi iti dhatu asti, tatra idagamah na bhavati. We don't need to worry about how the final form is constructed. Kevalam idagamah na bhavati ityeva idanim paryaptam. Kati dirgha ikarah itsamnyakah asti idagamah na bhavati. Shmani dirgha ikarah itsamnyakah asti idagamah na bhavati, and so on. Atra adit dhatu asti. Adit dhatu asti chet bhavadi karmanoho idagamah vikalpena bhavati. So for adit dhatus, remember ta pratyaya can be used, even ta, not tavatu here, but ta pratyaya can be used in adi karmani also and bhave also, whereas the tavatu pratyaya can be used in adi karmani, not bhave. So adi karmani and bhave, in these contexts when a pratyaya is used, optional idagama is allowed. In all other contexts, the idagama is completely blocked. This was the reason why we had to study all these different classes, Adikarmani, Bhave, Kartari and all that, before we jumped onto the Prakriya. So Adikarmani Prayoga asti chet, Adit, this all is about the Adit Dhatu, so sequential sutras, 7 to 16 and 7 to 17. Adit Dhatu asti chet, Samanya Rupen Idagamah na bhavati, parantu Adikarmani Prayoga asti, no chet Bhave Prayoga asti, chet Idagamah bhavati. So here I have just shown both forms because we don't know just by looking over here which prayoga it is. So aditah ityanena idagama nishidyate, kshvinna minna sfurna aditasya iti idagama nishidyate, kshvedita and so on, medita sfurchita ityatra sarvatra idagama bhavitum arhati. The last sutra is shriyukaha kiti, etadapi purvam pathitam asti. Uganta dhatu, any dhatu that ends in ukara, rasva or dirgha, and rkara, rasva or dirgha. Uganta dhatu, u or ru. There are no dhatus that end in lu. It something has to be removed. So gamlu and these examples are not acceptable. So any dhatu and that ends in u or ru, rasva or dirgha, that will not get an idagama. Tasmat ekach dhatoho vihitayoho nishtha pratyaho idagama na bhavati. So ukaranta dhatu, rasva ukaranta, yu, yuta, ru, ruta, kshunu, kshnuta. Dirgha ukaranta asti chet luna, bhuta, suta. Rkaranta asti chet vrita, pruta, svruta. Dirgha rukaranta asti chet tru becomes tirna. So idagama is not there. That's all that you have to notice. Don't notice anything else. What other transformation is there? We'll learn that in the due course. And then shriya sevayam iti vishishtaha dhatu atra sutre nirdishta asti. Shriyah tatha cha ugantah. So shri iti dhatuh shrita, shritavata iti atra sarve idagamasya nishedasya udaharanani sarvani santi. So that's all basically. On this slide, what you have is the summary. Essentially, if there is a scope of not having an idagama, the nishtha pratyas will not do an idagama. So anit dhatuhu na bhavati, vet dhatuhu na bhavati, udit dhatuhu ktva gets a vikalpa, therefore na bhavati, idit dhatuhu explicitly there is a sutram na bhavati, uganta dhatu na bhavati, adit dhatu bhavadi karma bhava no chet adi karma asti chet vikalpena bhavati anyatra na bhavati. So all these no. After you cancel all these out, whatever remaining dhatus are there, we'll start seeing from tomorrow. So even in that particular case, anye dhatavaha tatrapi kinchit kartanam karaniyam. We'll do some trimming in that case of anye dhatus. More interestingly, there are some dhatus in this particular set for which there are explicit sutras to give back the idagama. So for example, even if we say blanket weight dhatus idagamaha na bhavati, So for example, if you go back to the set of weight dhatus and you say all these weight dhatus, you don't get idagama. But then there is a separate sutram over here which gives back the idagama for nira plus kusha. So nira plus, that's why there is a off numbering. So 7 to 46 and you have 7 to 48. The missing sutram over here, 7 to 47, will actually give back the idagama for nira kusha for the nishtha pratyayas. So some kind of circus is there. Mostly this chart that is presented on the screen is the one that you see right now is sufficient for 90% of the cases. Anit dhatus, weight dhatus, udit, idit, uganta, adit, you do not get an idagama. The sutra and the example is over here. All other dhatus you get an idagama. This will secure you for 95% of the cases. All the remaining 3 or 4 classes that we are going to take, I'll try to condense it into 3. 3 more classes that we are going to take is for 5% of the special cases. It's always 80-20 rule or whatever, 90-10 rule. If you understand this particular chart correctly, you are covered for 90% of the cases. So please study, take a printout of this chart and print it or hang it on a wall in front of you. Read this, practice using this. So adyatra samapayamaha. The exercises for today are similar on the base, are on the same lines. So nishtha pratyayaho prakriyayaha prarambhika sopaniti adyatana sapta saptatitamaha pathaha. The first question is kind of a revision. Adhodattanam sutranam svabhashaya kta pratyasa sandarbhena artham likhata. So aster bhuhu kamer linga no naha adir nidravah nishtha. These are all the sutras that we studied in the initial part of today's discussion. The second question is more interesting. Adhodattanam ktanta pratipadikanaam prakriyayam idagamaha kena sutrena nishuddhyate tat sutram likhata. So for 15 different examples are given. I have given the dhatu, I have also given the final form. Find out which sutram on the previous table. There are some 8-10 sutras that I have listed. Out of these sutras, which sutram is responsible for blocking the idagama over here? So that's all about the exercise today. Today's date is 19, the deadline is 29. The exercise discussion will be on 12th. So samapayama, there is 1 or 2 questions that I can take. So the question is, are these dhatus written over here after the it lopa? The answer is yes. I mean, it samnya lopa has to be done all the way in the beginning. I mean, this question itself shows lack of understanding of this chart. If it samnya lopa is already done over here in step number 2, and if we are talking about idagama over here in step number 6, there is no question of it samnya, even it shouldn't even come to your mind. It samnya has already gone in step number 2. We are talking about idagama in step number 6. When you say ukaranta dhatu, it is what you see over there. It is not it samnya at the end. It is just a dhatu which ends in an ukara. Forget about the it samnya present over there. Anyway, in general, yatra yatra ukaradihi ukarantaha iti sarvam asti tatra tatra sarvatra it samnya vihaya eva tatra dhatoho grahanam karaniyam. So that's it, samapayamaha. What we are going to do tomorrow is the summary over here. So idagama prakarane vidyamanani nishtha pratyaya vishishtani sutrani. So then there are certain sutras explicitly for nishtha, they will give an idagama. Understand this. There are certain sutras which will give optional idagama for the nishthas. There are certain sutras that will explicitly block the idagama for the nishthas. And fourth, and the more interesting, yasya vibhasha will cause the idagama nishedha. So there will be sutras that will talk about the idagama nishedha of the san pratyaya. That will talk about the idagama option for the san pratyaya. Idagama vikalpa san pratyasya, nochet sya pratyasya, lit lakarasya, kasyachana anyasya idagama vikalpaha tatra uchyate. Even all those sutras need to be studied because yasya vibhasha will cause an idagama nishedha for them. That is, this yasya vibhasha actually is an all-encompassing sutra. Yasya vibhasha will take all other sutras also in the picture, because this sutra says anyena kenachit sutrena idagamaha vikalpyate chet yasya vibhasha ityenena idagamaha nishuddhyate. So yasya vibhasha sutrasya samyak adhyanartham anyesham sutranam api adhyanam avashyakam. So nishtha pratyaho yasya vibhasha iti indirectly idagama nishedha katham bhavati. That set of sutras we will study towards the end. So these are 4 important bricks that we will follow, and then there are a few more nipatanas and all that. I did not feel like representing them over here, but there are certain some 8 to 10 sutras related to nipatanas. तेषां विषये अपि अग्रिमवर्गे पठामः। इत्यलं श्वः अस्मिन्नेव समये पुनरेकवारं कक्षा भविष्यति। अष्टाध्यायी जगन्माता यस्य चित्तात् समुत्थिता वेदानामुपकाराय तस्मै पाणिनये नमः। शब्द ब्रह्म समाराध्य कृतवान्यो विलक्षणं सर्वाश्चर्यमिदं शास्त्रं तस्मै पाणिनये नमः। येन धौता गिरः पुंसां विमलैः शब्दवारिभिः तमष्टाज्ञानजं भिन्नं तस्मै पाणिनये नमः। धन्यवादः।